Okay, so chapter 3 we start into ladder logic, and we're only going to spend a short amount of time on ladder logic. You've all gone through the basic PLC, so you've all been exposed to ladder logic, but we're going to do kind of a review on some of the ladder logic, and then next week we're going to work on timers, and that's also going to be using ladder logic. And the interesting thing, at least interesting for me, is you're going to do this timers assignment on ladder logic, and it's probably going to take you a couple hours to get it done. And then when we get into using structured text, we're going to do the same assignment all over again. And once you get the hang of structured text, it's going to take you like 20 minutes. This is one big difference between Control Logix and Slick 500. For outputs, you can put multiple outputs on one rung. You can't do that with Slick 500. So it gives you a little more flexibility on setting up your ladder logic. Normally open, normally closed. And this part for me is always confusing. I really don't like normally closed in ladder logic because I just can't picture it. So here's normally open or examine if closed contact. Alan Bradley likes to call it examine if closed. So if this goes hot or it's closed, then it continues the rest of the rung. If it's open, it's not hot, then it just goes to the next rung. It doesn't do whatever it's saying. Normally closed contact or examine if open. So they compare it here to real world switches, but their comparison kind of has a It's not a very good pin. So there's my real world wiring. That's a normally open switch. And if I push the button, it closes the circuit, turns on my light bulb, right? That's super straightforward. Now I'll do a normally closed. With a normally closed switch, if I push that button or if I activate the switch, it's going to turn off this light. Still pretty straightforward, right? Okay, now I'll switch to ladder logic. Normally open input for ladder logic. If this goes hot or I close it, I get an output, right? Here's my normally closed. If I make that guy hot, what happens?
Disengage. Light turns off.
Light turns off. So it's kind of like a double negative, and when you get into actually using normally closed inputs, a lot of times it just works backwards the way you think you have it. So a lot of times you have to try it one way and see what's happening and then go back and switch it, because it's kind of a double negative. I always try to use normally open because this is a normally open input. If it goes hot, then your output to that pump goes hot. Normally closed, if it goes hot, that pump goes off. This is a very typical setup for presses. Blaze Pizza, when you go in, they take a ball of dough and they put it on a press and they swing the platen over the press, and then they have to push 2 buttons to make that press activate. Why do you want to push 2 buttons?
Make sure your hands are out of the way.
Yeah. If you have to push 2 buttons to make something work, then it keeps you from getting your hand into the equipment. So it's a very common setup for presses and punches and anything where something moves close to the operator. Unfortunately, at the Blaze Pizza I was at, they didn't set it up correctly, and they had a latching contact. So the person puts the dough there, they swing the platen over top, They hit both buttons and then they can walk away while the thing comes down and does the job. Called AND logic. You have to have this and this in order for the output to operate. OR logic, you just have to have one. A doorbell's a good example. You don't want to have to push both doorbell buttons to make the doorbell ring. What I want to do now is I want to switch to the actual studio. Open Studio 5000. I'm going to select this top controller and I'm going to call it Demo Paul 020520. Version 30, it's a 7-slot backplane. My controller's in slot 0. On a lot of the other computers, for some reason it always defaults to a 10-slot. So pay attention to that. Make sure you get 7-slot. And it's finished, so that'll take a minute to open. All right, it's open. You can see at the top here, it's got my project name that I just created. Down at the bottom, you can see I have no modules configured. If I go to my controller tags, there's nothing in there. So the first thing I need to do is go online with the PLC. Actually, first thing I need to do is turn on the PLC. I need to go on with it, configure my modules that I'm going to use, and then I can start putting in my aliases. Who active? Always with Studio 5000, pay attention to what's going on up in the corner here. You don't want anything flashing. You should be in run mode, your controller okay, and your I/O should be active. Right now it says I/O not present. That's because I don't have any I/O. I'm going to configure my first two modules with Discover. I have my first two modules. I'm only going to use the first two modules for these labs, so that's the only ones I'm going to discover. Nice and simple. Now when I go to my controller tags, notice I have the addresses for my first two modules. I've got local 1 and local 2. The next step, I'm going to go offline. So I've got my modules discovered. Now I'm going to go offline. And I'm going to create some aliases. Now the first logic you're going to do, it's very simple. It's like push this green button to make this yellow light go on. So I'm going to go to Edit Tags. Notice there's two tabs at the bottom. Click on Edit Tags. My first one, I'm just going to call it green. Green button 0. And that's going to be an alias for, that's an input. So local 1. I don't want to use the calibration. I want to use my inputs. Expand that. Expand the data tab. And I'm going to take 0. The other one I need is, I need my yellow light. And I can call these anything I want. I could call it start button or flashy light or anything I want. Yellow light 0 is alias for my output, data, and I'll use 0. So I've got two aliases in my tags now. I'm going to do all my tags up here in controller tags. I'm not going to use I could do them down here under the program, but it's simpler to just do them all under the program tags. So I've got my two aliases. I've got one input, one output. Now when I go to my main routine, I can put in an input and I want an output. For my input, I double click on it and I see up here my green button 0. So that's my input. And here I need that yellow light 0. Okay, notice that this turned blue. Initially it had a red X beside it saying that my rung is no good. If your rungs aren't good, it won't let you go online. So you have to make sure you get your rungs good. That means if you're going to do 4 different rungs, sometimes it's better to do 1, go online, make sure it works, then go back offline. Then add in the second rung. If I go and add this rung here because I know I'm going to do something else but I want to go online, it's not going to let me go online. So I'll just delete that guy. Up here is a little checkbox. Notice down here it's giving me a bunch of text. So I'm going to click the checkbox and it says 0 errors. So everything looks good. Now I'm going to go online. And here it says we're done downloading. Do I want to change it back to remote run? I'll click yes. Notice up here everything's green, nothing's flashing. And here I've got a green bar and that tells me I'm online. If I go back into program mode instead of run mode, notice that green went away. So if you don't have that green, then you're not controlling your PLC. You're not in run mode. Now I'm in run, and if I push the green button, oops, how come?
That's the wrong slot. It's not 0. It should be what?
Not 0, it should have been output 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I used the wrong address. My code is working, so my input's going hot, it's sending an output, it sent it where I told it to go, but I told it to go in the wrong place. So to fix that, I have to go offline, go back to my tags, and edit. And this guy should have been 4. Notice when I go here, it tells me that 0 is already taken. I'll change that to 4. Check it. I've got no errors. Go back online and test it. Now it's working. Okay, so the steps: create a new project. You can use a project that you already have or just start. Sometimes if you start with one controller and you've moved somewhere else, the PLCs are not all configured the same. So whatever file you're starting with might not be compatible with the next PLC and it might need some fixing. So down where it shows the module, sometimes you get a little flag that's showing that something's not set up right. Configure your modules, and then you need to go and set up the aliases for every tag that you want to use for your assignment. I only did 1 input and 1 output, but you should read through the assignment, see which buttons and lights you're going to use, and get all those tags set up. Once your tags are set up, then do your ladder logic programming, do it 1 rung at a time. Keep going online, test it, go back offline, and do the next one. If you go online and it's not doing what it should be doing, then let's stop and work on it from there. So don't try to do the whole assignment in one go, because if something's not working right, it's harder to troubleshoot.